My name is Jonathan Poritz. I've retired from two careers over many years, one as a professor of mathematics and computer science, another in parallel working in various companies and research centers on cryptology, artificial intelligence, and quantum computation. These days I think of myself as a gig worker in the open education movement.
And my name is Kathy Giuffre. I'm a retired professor of sociology. I spent 30 years researching and teaching about communities, networks, social movements, and collective action.
It often seems like today the world is going through a kind of slow apocalypse, with genocidal violence, devastating climate change, global pandemic, and on and on and on, all horribly exacerbated by an awful rightward trend in politics in so many nations. As people who want to do something to make the world a better place, we have found it hard not to despair. But then we remembered that our various careers and lives have given us tools which we find useful and which we hope may be useful to you as we try to resist the slide into dystopia. This episode is going to be a little bit different from most of the others we've done because we're concentrating on an entirely practical matter, no theory, just practicalities of resistance. The issue we're going to talk about today has to do with leaving the United States. We are Americans in our origin, but we do not live in the United States at the moment. We've had many emails from friends, colleagues, coworkers, other people we know in the United States in the last few weeks saying, how did you get out? And this may seem like it has little to do with resistance, but actually, if you think about it, taking your skills, your knowledge, your creativity, and taking them to a place where you are not treated as disposable, you are not treated as garbage, as a lot of communities are being treated in the United States right now, is an act of resistance. So we think that that's appropriate for us to do, and we're going to concentrate on those practical issues in this episode.
I just want to say that also we completely recognize our privilege here. We have education, we have money, we have contacts, we have language skills. We have a lot of things going for us that made immigrating easier for us than it is for other people. Most of the people who are immigrating around the world today are doing so under extreme circumstances. They are refugees, and all of the things we're talking about are so far beyond what they may be able to do. Nevertheless, if some of these hints and tips and bits of practical knowledge can be useful to you, we hope you'll take them for what they're worth.
Okay, let's just go through. We have 17 practical issues we want to cover in this episode, starting with a group of them which might be under the category of things to think about before you go. Number one, if you are in the United States and you're thinking of emigrating to a particular country, you might first do as much research as you can before you leave. Things to look into are things like health insurance, quality of life, employment opportunities, opportunities for legal status, and so on. So do some research before you go. It makes it much easier to arrive there with some knowledge ahead of time.
And the second thing is one of the most important things you want to research in looking at different countries is the cost of living. And that's a little trickier than it may seem at first. There are lots of places online that compare average cost of living for different countries, but the cost of living in different places in different countries can vary widely. So, for example, we have found that often in places in Europe, if you're living in the big cities, the cost of living is much higher than if you're living in smaller towns or villages outside of the big metropolitan areas. So research the cost of living with some specificity about where specifically you might want to live.
Number three, there will be legal issues to do with your immigration. We strongly recommend that you contact an immigration lawyer in country, in the country you're intending to move to. There are many intricacies and it's important in your life. And speaking to someone who has the expertise, the legal expertise, is really valuable. You can find often legal firms that provide this information. You may be able to get a quick consultation with one of these firms, even without officially employing them as your main lawyer. So the price doesn't necessarily have to be a big obstacle. If you are really concerned about the cost, often there are agencies that are oriented to may help immigrants in moving. So getting the specific information from a lawyer is better than getting something off the internet which could be incorrect or just asking people who may not be up to date with the precise legal requirements which matter in your life.
Number 4 is if there's a possibility of citizenship for you if you have family connections or if there's some reason you think you may be able to get citizenship in another country. Start now. Start before you leave the United States. Sometimes it's actually easier to get citizenship from outside a country than inside it. One of the things that we discovered in moving here was because I was getting citizenship inside the country, I had to take a language test to show proficiency in the new language, which I would not have had to do if I'd done that while I was still in the United States.
All right, point number 5, continuing with the theme of language, we really think it's an incredibly important thing to be able to communicate with people in the country you're arriving in. Learning a little bit of the language before you go can be an incredibly important step in making your transition easier. Learning a little bit of basic vocabulary, some phrases like please and thank you, which are absolutely vital, and maybe also where's the toilet? Those kinds of things you can master, and they will make an enormous difference if you're talking to someone on the street in your new country and you say please and thank you with an accent, but in the language. It's a great bridge between cultures. I want to give you a warning, though. People may tend to think I'm going to be able to translate things quickly, and the bigger providers online will give you tools such as translate.google.com. I have found translate.google.com is one of the least reliable online translation tools. It is, I think, suffered some of the general enshittification that Google has suffered from recently. Other sources I would recommend you to use, there's one called Deepl, DEEPL.com. There are also two called reverso.net, reverso.net, and wordreference.com. Both of them support many pairs of languages, translating between many pairs of languages, and they have much better translation quality, and some of them, for example, will offer you many different translations of a word in different contexts with sample sentences.
All right, number 6. Before you go, if you're thinking that you may be able to take your pets with you, my recommendation would be get them microchipped. Go to the vet, make sure all their vaccines are up to date, get a microchip put in. Your vet can do that and keep all the documentation for that. If you're transporting a pet to a different country, sometimes that can make all the difference. There may be quarantine rules set up. Microchips will make that a lot easier.
Number 7, we strongly recommend that you get some local contacts in the country to which you are moving. This may seem obvious, but certainly if you have friends or family or people you know through work, even a tenuous relationship, reach out to those people. They will often be very happy to tell you about their home country and give you tips about particular circumstances unique to that country that will help make your transition much easier, and they may continue to be a useful resource after you've moved. You can zap them a quick question, hey, how do I handle this situation in this country?
All right, the next set of tips we have to do with paperwork. So number 8, get birth certificates before you leave the U.S. Get at least 2 or 3 of your birth certificates. You get them from the Bureau of Vital Statistics in the state where you were born. You also need to get with that a form called an apostille. APOSTILLE. This is a form that validates these documents, any sort of official document you get from the United States, so that it's recognized in different countries. Doing this process may take some time. It may take a few months, actually, to get things like a birth certificate and the apostille that goes along with that makes that acceptable to foreign governments. So you get an apostille at the same office that issued, for example, a birth certificate in the state where you got it. If it's a federal document, you get that from the U.S. Department of State in Washington, D.C. Check their website and they can tell you about the process you go through to get it.
All right, number 9. So if you're going to be moving to another place for quite some time, you're going to have to think about visas. Within the European Union, there's free movement of labor. You don't need visas. But if you're coming from the United States to, I believe, any other country on the planet, after a certain period of time, you'll need some local visa. There are often a variety of different kinds of visas you can get. Depending upon your level of hardship and the government of the country you're going to, you may be able to get a visa that is available to certain kinds of refugees. There are also visas that are available for study or for work. If you are able to find some employment ahead of time, your employer may well be willing to sponsor you for a local work visa, or students often get student visas. If you fit into none of those categories, there are sometimes digital nomad visas, which allow you to come to that country as long as you are working through the internet, which you might be able to do.
Number 10, get some copies of your fingerprints. There are different places you can do this. Have it done in the United States before you leave. There are offices that do it. You can also do it at many post offices. What you want is a card, an official card with your fingerprints on it that you can use should you need to send in your fingerprints to any U.S. agency once you're out of the country. Often those places will only accept fingerprints that were made in the United States. So get, again, at least 2 or 3 copies of your fingerprints and keep them with you. You may need, for example, your criminal record in order to be admitted into a long-term stay, such as citizenship, or even a long-term visa in another country. That will require you to send your fingerprints to the FBI in the United States, so you will need to have those.
Number 11, we strongly suggest that before you go, you get paper copies of credentials you may have, particularly educational credentials. You may be familiar with this if you had to apply for a job or for further education, a transcript and or simply a statement that you have a degree that you claim to have. Get an official version of that from the issuing institution. Bring it with you. You may need more than one copy of that to apply for various visa statuses or employment or further education.
Number 12, get an international driver's license. These are very easy to get. You can get them, for example, at AAA offices. They're very cheap to get. It's a piece of paper that just says you have a valid driver's license in the United States, but allows you to drive in other countries. They last for 1 year from the time that they're issued. So have them dated from the day you're planning on leaving the United States.
Okay, a quick category with only 2 items. This is things that you might think to bring with you. Number 13, bring the medications that you take regularly with you. These could be prescription medications, or they could be some over-the-counter medication which you have found particularly effective, such as an allergy medication. Bring as much as you can that may last you as long as you can, because you're going to be building a new life in a new place, and getting set up in the health system in that new place can be complicated and time-consuming, and you don't want to run out of some important medication before you have a way of getting a local equivalent.
Number 14, as well as appropriate clothes and shoes for the climate that you're going to be in, as well as your medications. You may also want to think about things like family heirlooms, photos, recipes. These are things that may carry enormous emotional significance for you and that you may want to have with you. Having said that, you want to pack as lightly as you can for your travels. So if you have someone who is staying in the United States, who you can trust, who's going to be stable, you may want to see if you can leave a few things with them. You could put things in a storage unit, knowing that those are sometimes in the United States very insecure. But you may just want to think about doing things like digitizing photos or family recipes that are important to you.
All right, our last category of topics is things to handle once you've arrived. Last item number 15, you may well want to keep touch with people back in the United States or in other countries, and the question is how to do that as safely and economically as possible. International phone calls can be quite expensive. There are services on the internet which will give you audio or audio-video connections all over the world, and it may cost you nothing. As a famous computer scientist said, if a service costs you nothing, then probably you're the product. You're being surveilled and sold, and I don't particularly like that. So WhatsApp is one that is widely used. It is free and quite reliable. It does have a form of end-to-end encryption, so it does have some security. WhatsApp is owned by Meta, the parent company of Facebook, and so I'm not particularly happy using it. A more secure and independent organization is Signal. So Signal has an app which again does audio, video, and text messages internationally for free that is, I would say, more reliable than WhatsApp, but not as widely used, so it may take a little bit of education, but you might want to look for the Signal communication app.
Number 16, how do you get money to use while you're in the country? Usually, for the short term at least, your bank card will work at an ATM. You just put it in, punch in your PIN number, and get cash in the local currency out. You will get fees. It will depend on, once again, where you are. Places with low fees will be places, for example, not at airports, but somewhere else, at an actual bank that has a bank machine in it. But that's a way in the short term to get ready cash, is get it out of your bank account in the United States by using your regular ATM card there. In the long term, you're probably going to need a local bank account, but in the short term, you can get money that way.
Our last item, number 17, is that we strongly recommend that you immerse yourself in the local community. It's a great way to learn the local language and practice it, and we have found that people are incredibly kind and generous with you as you stumble to speak your new language.
This is also how you're going to make friends, and these friends offer not only friendship, which is great, but this will be your support network for a long time to come. So becoming part of the community is really vital for making a new country not just a new place to live, but a new home.
As always, more information is available on our website, therevolutionwillnotbetelevised.net. Thank you.